The shift for me was living internally or living externally versus internally. Like, I grew up and I always wanted to prove someone else right. I always wanted to show other people I was good enough. I always wanted to fit in and be the fun guy. I always wanted to be the top performer. But I never thought about, like, what do I really want? And, like, what is it really going to take? And is the juice worth the squeeze? I was kind of more like, I want to be on the D1 roster. I'm going to show up to practice and I'm going to be good. And then I'm going to go party because I want to be the fun guy. And I just like operated out of a lot of alignment. And I think that's because I let the external world dictate my decisions. And I think the shift when I got sober is like you're on your hands and knees, you know your life's spiraling out of control. And you have this moment where you're like, wait, I have no control. I'm letting things outside of myself dictate my reality. Like, something has to change. And through that first year, that first journey, the change was like, wait, I need to start living life for me. And I need to be selfish and from the lens of like, this is what I need. And then that unlocked a lot of selflessness in an ironic way, where before I used to always like live outside of me.
Hey, Mile 40 fam. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by the leaders in male grooming at Manscaped. They're helping us spice up the hair care regimen on our heads with something fresh. No, it's not a new razor. It's not ball deodorant. Get ready for the game-changing new Scalp Buffer by Manscaped. Let's break down why you need to add this bad boy to your hair care routine. First things first, check out these thick silicone bristles. They're 100% antibacterial. No more germs hitching a ride on your head. The bristles gently exfoliate your scalp, and the product helps reduce flaking caused by dry skin and buildup. The bristles enhance shampoo penetration for more foam and less product juice. It's not just about feeling good. A better lather means better cleaning power. You can also pair it with the 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner from Manscaped for the ultimate hair care routine. These products are designed to work together, giving your hair the nourishment and strength it needs. Simply put, the Scalp Buffer is your scalp's secret weapon. Its antibacterial silicone bristles keep your scalp healthy, maximizes shampoo performance, gives you a soothing massage, kicks bacteria to the curb, and stores away like a champ. Take your scalp from zero to hero with the Scalp Buffer. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code MILE40 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code MILE40 at manscaped.com. Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. I am so grateful for your support, for your feedback, for your reviews. If you haven't already, take a minute right now, look at the app, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, hit subscribe, hit that button. It means a lot to me. It really helps the show grow. Also, check out the show notes. There is a discount code for picking up a copy of Audacious or Break Barriers in there. Really appreciate all of your support. I am very excited to dive into today's episode. Today, I have Billy Murphy. Billy was actually a former colleague of mine. He's the co-founder of Zero Proof, a community platform meant to make it easy to feel good about not drinking. He sells software. He sells software at AlertMedia, and he was previously, like I mentioned, at Salesforce. Also, a former D1 athlete, Patriot League champion. He plays in the Drew League, which we're going to geek out about, a pro-am basketball league in Los Angeles. He's a new father to Sage, and he's a husband to Megan. And one thing that's going to be central to this episode is we're going to dive into his sobriety. He's now been sober for 6 years. Billy, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, Bishoy, honored to be here. Thanks for having me. Excited to dive into this one.
Of course, man. So you and I were connected. What year did you leave Salesforce?
I left Salesforce in the middle of 2021, like mid 2021.
Okay, 2021. And I believe we had met shortly before you had left, and we had been connected through Tony K's and AVP over at Salesforce. And the way he really connected the dots was he heard me speak once. He heard you speak. He knew you a little bit more closely, and he just kind of picked up on the fact that these two people would mesh together. And he just kind of connected us. And ever since then, we've kept a line of communication open. And you know when I met you then and you had told me about your story, it always stuck with me, even though I was at a completely different place in my life. But something about how easy, at least it came off, right? It probably wasn't easy, and we're going to dive into that. But your decision to become sober, you told the story very fluidly, and it was abundantly clear and evident how uplifting that decision was for your life. And so let's take a step back here, just give the audience a little bit further background on where you grew up, what family life was like for you as a youngster, and we can kind of build up to where we are today.
So originally, I'm an East Coaster at heart. Grew up in Connecticut. One of three boys. I'm the oldest. Mom and dad, looking after us. They had their hands full for sure, as you can imagine. Bunch of boys running around, wrestling, creating chaos. My mom might have called my dad a few times in the middle of the day, freaking out on what to do. But I would say, pretty traditional upbringing. Awesome family. Very close with my brothers. I'd consider them my best friends. Very close with my parents. Um, can't see through the screen, but I'm 6'10", so naturally sports and I tended to get along. Grew up, really playing every sport I possibly could. Ended up, I think you mentioned this, but ended up really leaning into basketball, and has really been a huge part of my life even to today. But I would say, the classic student athlete, always trying to achieve at a high level, always had big dreams of, being the best version of myself. And really, my roots are back in Fairfield County, Connecticut. So long good
What's
way.
what school did you play at?
So I played at Lafayette College. Shout out to the Patriot League, and you know the experience was amazing. I think in retrospect, a lot of deep learnings I wasn't aware of through that experience, especially since my shift to sobriety. Created some of the best friends I could ever have imagined. And ultimately, we got to go to March Madness one year, which is when you think about Division I basketball, mid major, like that's the dream, right? That is the end all be all, and that was the dream from when I was 10 years old. So really really cool experience there.
How far did you guys make it?
Uh, Round one,
No,
Villanova,
fair.
Villanova,
Still
the
made
Josh
it.
Harts, the Ochifu, Ryan Archidiakono, they give us a good stomping, but it
That's
was still
amazing.
an experience.
That's amazing. Getting to share a court with them is still something that you could talk about for a long time. So, being an East Coaster, who do you root for?
I'm a Knicks guy through and
I
through.
love it. All right,
So
I'm a big Knicks fan here, season ticket holder.
there we
So
go. This is
yeah,
our year, baby.
this is our year. It's going to be a big year. It would be a dream of mine to get Josh on the show. So if you have any back channel contacts there, we
There
can
we
definitely
go.
talk about that.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 2016.
2016. Okay. Um, Besides basketball, obviously being at the forefront, talk to me a little bit about what your life was like socially.
Yeah, so basketball was always like the thing that I would say I personally strove to be good at. And then socially, you know, I was always a fun guy. I always identified in like the fun group. And I would say I went down the wrong path around, just leaning into socializing a little too much in college. And I think I didn't realize it until I kind of took a step back. Um, and I didn't really get a lot of playing time. I didn't, have the best like experience from the lens of like getting on the court. So I think I took a lot of that energy and I put it into like, well, everyone loves Billy, who's on the basketball team, who's having a ton of fun. And I kind of wrapped myself in this identity in a social scene at Lafayette, which was a lot of fun. But I think it created some pretty bad habits, which we can talk about at some point. But long story short, like definitely was leaning into the late nights and having a good time. And it definitely took me off the path a little bit.
Got it. We're definitely going to circle back there. So let me ask you: you graduate college, you're a D1 athlete. Had a ton of athletes come on this show. A lot of them succeeded at the collegiate level. Some of them, went pro. And then there's always this identity struggle that comes up a lot with athletes when they get to the end of the road of what they think is the pinnacle of their career. Clearly that wasn't the end of your career, given that you play in the Drew League now, but was that something that you had planned, or, did you think basketball was going to be done after college?
Yeah, I think I was pretty realistic. I think even for my college selection, I prioritized a good education as alongside like playing basketball. I knew the odds. I think my dad specifically did a really good job of making it very clear you're one injury away from this not being the end for you. So make sure you study hard. Make sure you set yourself up, and don't be the guy that looks back and says, "Oh man, I wish I studied harder. I wish I set myself up for success." Um, Luckily, knock on wood, haven't had any major injuries. But I think through that experience of basketball, I just realized, especially back then, like it wasn't probably the path for me. And I never really had huge aspirations of playing pro because like I was pretty realistic there.
So educate us, the audience who are unaware of the Drew League in general, even how to get, yourself in the door over there, how that came to be.
Yeah, so the Drew League has been around since 1976. It's a pro am in Los Angeles. I would say it's the best pro am in the summer in the country. You'll see a lot of the NBA guys stop by and play. DeMar DeRozan, LeBron came by 2 years ago. Kyrie Irving, and it's really like a place for the community to come together and watch high quality basketball, but also it's a really good opportunity for kids and younger basketball players who might not have had the avenue of college to get some exposure and give themselves like a real look at what's next and maybe get into a JUCO, get into a professional team. So it's this really cool community. It's very uplifting. And when you think about talent, like at this point in my life, I'm not going to find a better place to kind of keep that itch going. So it's a really fun, nationally like recognized pro am in Los Angeles.
So you graduated in 2016. So what does that make you? Almost 30 right now?
31.
31. Okay, got it.
Yep.
And when did you start playing with the Drew League?
This was my third summer this past summer. So I moved down to Manhattan Beach, California, right around the same time I left Salesforce. Kind of the work remote thing in the software world was a reality. My wife and I kind of looked at each other, and we loved San Francisco, but we're ready for the next chapter and kind of moved down to LA. And I just started playing hoops and kind of got connected randomly to this. Um, yeah, that's kind of why I started playing because I moved down here.
And like, man, I've watched some of your reels. Like, you're really good, obviously. I mean, like, just being the fact that you're a former D1 player says a lot to begin with. But again, contextually, for the audience sake, when you think about the Drew League and you think perhaps maybe about, the developmental league in the NBA, can you speak to the competition? Are you far apart? Are you close? What's kind of the gap there? Yeah, you got a good shot. You got a good shot. No, no, I think you are because, you know, people don't understand that kind of once you get to that level, people don't understand, and, watching it even, via Instagram and looking at the reels, and I used to play a lot of basketball as a kid, and I loved basketball and had huge ambitions as I was getting older, but, you get to a point, in my case, where you just kind of realize, the distinguishing factors that go into getting to that level. And from my seat, I can't help but respect, how you've continued to develop yourself. And I think your call out about finding your role and finding your position. I mean, as you were saying that, I was kind of like shining on the inside because it does transcend basketball. And if before you said that, I didn't think of that, and all it makes me want to kind of ask you now is think about the basketball player you were 10 years ago. Who did you want to be on the court?
Yeah, I mean, I always, used to, I would say a humility moment here. I think I used to always like get outside of myself and try to compare myself to people who, probably I would never be. Um,
Compare away. I'm interested.
I would say people like Chris Bosh, or
Yeah,
I would say people like Kevin Love, or that kind of stuff. I get the Kevin Love comparison a lot. I think it's just
I
because
could see that. Yeah,
maybe because I'm you know white and have a beard and look
yeah.
kind of old and gray, but
But look, you're tall and you've got a great
I need
outside
surgeries.
shot.
But I mean, I think I would like look at the stars just like any aspiring athlete and try to identify with them. And I think now, like, I'm realistic and I'm like, I'm more like Max Kleber on the Mavs. I come off the bench, set a few great screens, pop, hit a three, get a celebration, get it back in, and that's I'm good with that. And I think
Hey, man. I mean, look, still got a good contract, so you'll be all right. You'll be all right no matter what. No, that's awesome. Thanks for opening up about that a little bit. And part of that was me geeking out, and part of that was me trying to set the stage here, which I think you excellently did by again leaning into that whole idea of understanding your role. So now let's kind of take a step back here and talk about the personal journey outside of sport. And let's dive into um, go back to those college days, go back to that era, where maybe you had taken a misdirection or two. And then I want to kind of build up to when things kind of led to a transition or when you finally had to kind of make this decision. Because 6 years ago, you were 25 years old. I couldn't imagine making this decision at 25 years old. I barely made this decision at 35 years old. So talk to me about where things started.
yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like, if you were to just look at my basketball kind of journey, I think there's a lot of parallels and there's a lot of clarity I've found if you look at that timeline in terms of kind of the anchoring point for my success in basketball and like my happiness in basketball. At that moment, I got sober. I think in life as well. Um, and like as you could imagine, I'm a pretty reflective person, and I'm constantly looking back at like what's caused me to be where I am. How can I continually fine tune that? And I think a common theme, and I think we all find ourselves in it, is like the shift for me was living internally or living externally versus internally. Like, I grew up and I always wanted to prove someone else right. I always wanted to show other people I was good enough. I always wanted to fit in and be the fun guy. I always wanted to be the top performer. But I never thought about like, what do I really want? And like, what is it really going to take? And is the juice worth the squeeze? I was kind of more like, I want to be on the D1 roster. I'm going to show up to practice and I'm going to be good. And then I'm going to go party because I want to be the fun guy. And I just like operated out of a lot of alignment. And I think that's because I let the external world dictate my decisions. And I think the shift when I got sober is like you're on your hands and knees, your life's spiraling out of control. And you have this moment where you're like, wait, I have no control. I'm letting things outside of myself dictate my reality. Like something has to change. And through that first year, that first journey, the change was like, wait, I need to start living life for me. And I need to be selfish from the lens of like, this is what I need. And then that unlocked a lot of selflessness in an ironic way, where before I used to always like live outside of me. So I think the shift in my sobriety was like, am I living life from the lens of external versus internal? Um, and I think like that's a very high level bucket that we can unpack in many ways. But I mean, if I'm really being honest, I think it's like, am I aligned to who I am, or am I like just letting things outside of what's important dictate my decisions?
I think that's a really good call out, because a lot of time alcohol is nothing more than a mask for a lot of people, myself included. I definitely um, drank a lot in my 20s, and in college. And similarly, I don't think that I was really leading from within. I think I was playing the role that people had wanted me to be. And at the time, it was fun. I'm not going to sit here and say that it wasn't fun at the time and I didn't enjoy it at the time. But I think one of the things that you and I can both agree on is that we're a lot happier now. Uh, and at that point, we probably thought we couldn't be happier. And that's what I found out about this. And a friend of mine was writing a newsletter earlier this year. It was about like New Year's resolutions, and he talked about how not drinking was essentially a cheat code for him. And I couldn't have thought of a better way to put it. And it really resonated with me because I really feel like I unlocked a cheat code once I made this decision that for some reason felt like a decision that I would never have made 10 years ago. But it is ultimately that cheat code. But yeah, let's dig into that a little bit further. I want to hear about, you know, your confidence level overall, because one of the things that I've realized is that, when you go from um, that external validation to leaning into who you are internally, you unleash a whole new level of confidence that, again, perhaps you didn't think existed. So let's talk to that.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I kind of like live by this saying that really grounds me in making sure I'm always like living internally. And it's this idea of like find clarity, build confidence, become contagious, right? And like it's that order, because when you're certain in like who you are, and you're certain that you're making like a lot more of the right decisions than the wrong ones, by no means am I perfect. And like you're committed to a discipline, like your self confidence skyrockets. And it's not because like it's confidence to me used to be like, I'm the man, I scored 20 points. Confidence to me now is like I showed up and I look in the mirror at the end of the night and I did what I said I was going to do. And like that unlocks the 20-point game, right? And like that confidence is contagious. Like everyone wants the guy or the gal that's so certain in who they are and is not even thinking about the data or the stats or the results. They're just so dialed into like, this is who I promised I would be. This is how I'm going to show up. And I actually do it. And the rest takes care of itself. And I think that's what I mean when I say internal. It's like, don't even think about the points, the money, the temptations, the alcohol, the fun, all the things that make the dopamine go nuts. Right. Like I know we have a mutual acquaintance in Brian Mazza. Like Brian Mazza is all about talking about like the suffering. Like every high performer, every mile 40 moment starts with suffering, because suffering is the unlock to results. But it's the suffer like on your terms that you sign up for that gives you confidence, because you're like making the playing field that you want to be on, and the playing field isn't dictated by things outside yourself. I think that's like, to me, that's confidence. Like when I put my head on the pillow every night, did I show up as the version of myself that I wanted to that day? And if I stack 3, 4, 5, 6 months of that, 5 years, now 6 years in sobriety, right? The confidence gets out of control, right? And it's not arrogance. I
Yeah.
want to be clear. It's not arrogance,
No,
because
it's not.
humility and being humble is like one of my core things. Like for me, it's like confidence is when you don't have to be arrogant.
Yeah.
Confidence is you don't have to tell people about the 20-point game.
Yeah.
So long-winded way of answering. I think it's the finding clarity of who you are and who you want to be, and then like actually showing up as that person and doing the work to be that. Confidence comes, promise you.
Gain clarity, build confidence, be contagious, right?
Find clarity, build
Find,
confidence, become contagious, right? Like
become contagious.
everyone
And
wants that like attention, and I don't know why as humans we want that affirmation and that. Like I still fall into the trap. We all do. But the irony is like everyone likes the person that's so confident. It's just like an attraction thing. But it
no,
starts
you're
with how you
spot
show up.
on. You're spot on. And, I think this is an interesting part that I want to talk about. When you talk about building that gap between building that confidence and becoming contagious, especially in this arena. This arena, um, sometimes you could build that confidence and naturally you will become contagious because people will be curious. And you talk about this a lot in your newsletter. But that same zone between those two could also lead to some doubts around whether or not people really want to catch what you have, right? And so, that's where I find myself a lot, especially over the last 2 years around when people ask, like, I'll tell them and I'm honest about it. I'm open and I'm like, look, like, I feel the best I've ever felt. And it's not just physically. And I want to call that out for the listeners. It's actually mostly not physically because I was in pretty good shape before I made this decision. Most of it is mentally and emotionally. The level of clarity that I've gained has in turn turned into that confidence. Like that it's exactly the formula that you said, right? You get the clarity, and then all of a sudden the confidence builds. But you definitely get the sense that not everybody wants to catch that confidence. And my question to you is, how do you react to that? And I'm sure now you've been through this a lot longer than I have.
And is the question react to, I guess,
React to
yeah,
the skepticism
of becoming sober, not drinking,
of not
of
drinking. Yeah,
of
both
or
essentially.
yeah, I mean, I can only speak to my story. Like
Yeah,
everyone
speak
has
to your
their
story.
story.
Yeah,
I think for me, right, like you asked the question of like what builds confidence. I think it starts with one decision. I always talk about this a lot. Like one decision changed my life. And for me, it was to get sober. If there was any certainty in my life, I knew drinking was bad. It never led to good things. So I have this deep commitment within myself to never drink again. That commitment doesn't have to be to drinking, it can be to anything. But the confidence and the spark for me with the drinking is like I know like someone's asked me, "You think you'll drink when you're 85 and what?" I literally will tell you, for me, I'd rather be dead. Like I'd rather you shoot me than force me to drink. Like that's how deep my commitment to that is for me. And that's the unlock. Like how deep can you commit to something? Because like for me, that's the standard now for anything in my life. Because I know within, like I have that in me. I can commit to something and not falter. Now there's a trap because I'm too hard on myself a lot in other
yeah,
avenues of life. But there's this unlock that's shown me like what is possible with deep commitment, deep intention. And if you just show up as that person and take that identity of like, I don't drink. It's not I'm sober, I have a drinking problem. It's like I don't drink
yeah,
for me.
yeah.
And I
So,
think that's like, I don't know, the shift is not, and I think, I don't know, it's not about being sober forever. It's not about,
yep,
it's just about what is going to make you look in the mirror and have this dialed in commitment to yourself that you feel confidence grow every single day you make that happen.
yeah. No, that is spot on. But I want to take. I think as the audience kind of listens to this, we have to know. Talk to us about the day you made this commitment to yourself.
Yeah,
Was it on the back of something?
yeah, I'll never forget it. So I was at Salesforce. I was a BDR. Um, you're on a floor with what 50, 22 to 27 year olds who are all sales type A personalities, like, and you have some money to kill. Like it's super easy to have a lot of fun after working hours. And candidly, I think I fell into that trap. Like, I think I took that identity at Lafayette where it was like I was the fun guy. I took that to Salesforce and I got wrapped up in the wrong things. And like, I kind of woke up one day, I'll never forget it. I was visiting the office in New York City and I had this like moment where I was candidly hungover and I was out late the night before in New York, visiting in from San Francisco with some friends. And I had a conversation the day before I got sober with my mentor at work at the time. He was one of my account executives. I'll never forget it. And he was telling me like how much potential he saw in me and like that the sky was the limit. And my reaction was like, let's go have fun. Like there's my hit for the reason to drink tonight. And I woke up that next day and I had this like thing come over me. I was like, A, I'm sick and tired of feeling this way. B, like this guy's right. I do have that potential and I'm not being honest with myself. And if I don't change this right now, I'm probably going to lose my girlfriend and Megan, who's now my wife. Probably going to lose the job at Salesforce, which is like my dream thing out of college. I'm probably going to spiral. Like I just like it just came within me, and I just like knew if I didn't stop drinking that day, I would never be able to put my head down at night feeling good about who I was. And it wasn't like I had a rock bottom moment where my life totally. It was just like this deep like understanding and pattern recognition of like this is bad for me and it's finally time to do something about it.
No, I can relate to that. I mean, um, so a couple episodes ago, I had Claudia Colon come on the show. She works at Salesforce. I've had a couple people from Salesforce come on the show, but she had an experience also, through the Salesforce ecosystem. Had a wild night out where she ended up on a street in San Francisco, and things didn't end well there. And so this is not by any means a commercial for Salesforce, and
Yeah.
uh, they don't serve booze all day, but I think in corporate environments in particular, especially at a young age, when people are making a good amount of money, it is really easy to get caught up in that. And I mean, at that point in my life, I was in finance before I was at Salesforce. I was at JP Morgan, and similarly, kind of I was in that era of letting the fun dictate how I went about making my decisions. But the one thing I want to call out was similar to you. Once I made the decision, so I made the decision. It was 2 years ago in December, leading up to a dry January. And usually I just did dry January is more for the fad and for the health reasons, and just kind of, keeping my body in shape. And it just turned out that year I got admitted to the Boston Marathon. And so I knew I was going to be running Boston that April. And so I was like, you know what? I'm already not drinking in December, and sorry, in January, and I know I'm running this marathon in April, and I want to perform well out there. And no one's really partying that hard outside of the Super Bowl, maybe in February and maybe some March Madness. Like maybe I can, just stick this out. And the longer that I went without drinking, the more I realized the change starting to take form, about how good I felt, but more so how I was, like, happy. Like, I was a happy person. And that for me was part of the switch, and what kind of, made it a lot easier to commit to it. Now, the athlete in me, similar to you, once I made a promise to myself and a commitment to myself, now that's the part that, like, I don't wanna let myself down because I committed to this. Uh, but the human in me started to see, like, "Oh, like, you can be happy just being you. You can be happy not trying to be anything else." And I was married at the time. It's not like I didn't have to prove anything. I wasn't out there trying to get a girl or something like that. I was married, but I was even happier than I was before, once I made that decision. And so, I think that's a really important parallel to call out. Um, I wanna make sure that we touch on your personal journey as much before we go to zero proof and talk about how that kind of came to be. Talk to me about, that initial year, and if you had any instances where either doubt crept in, you weren't really sure of this decision that you made, or if it was a commitment once you made it, there was no turning back.
Yeah, the first year, I mean, that's where the deep good work comes from, and then
Yeah.
it's kind of you build from there. The doubts were real. I'll never forget, like, the addict brain, right? Drank alcohol a ton. My brain wanted to find reasons to tell me why I should drink again. Like, that's just how it works. Dopamine's a wild chemical. Um, like, it's the insanity that you can come up in your mind trying to rationalize. Oh, just have one beer. It's fine. Like, you could spend an hour on that. But I remember, like, there's like a clear identity shift that happens in that year where you kind of get powerless and you say, hey, like, I have no control over this and I'm willing to do whatever I need to stop this. And then you start kind of questioning, like, do I want to really take that identity on? Like, what about all my friends? Like, are they going to like me? Are they still going to think I'm fun? Fun's been my identity. Like, how can I be fun guy without drinking? How can I go to concerts? I love music. How can I watch a sporting event? How, right? You start, like, just ripping in your brain all the scenarios you drink. And you start telling yourself, this is never going to be fun again. And I remember, like, every step of the way being like, wait, this is actually more fun. Like, why was I putting such a crazy emphasis on this? Like, whoa, I went to a concert. I remember every single thing that happened. That's cool. Like, and what I started to realize in, like, my journey was like, this is actually just insecurity. Like, it's personal insecurity that, like, I couldn't show up in the arena that I wanted to without that layer, that mask, as you defined it, that unleashes the fun in me. And I think for me, like, the parallel was like, wait, like, I had fun before I drank. It's like riding a bike. Like, I just got to get back on the bike and figure it out. And the athlete in me turned it into this, like, competition where I was like, I'm going to go out. I'm not going to be the guy that gets sober and sits in his room all day. Like, I made that promise to myself. I was like, I'm going to take on the world as it comes. Now, once again, that was my path. I know everyone has a different path, and I want to be respectful of, like, some people might not be prepared to do that. But it served me well because I quickly started correlating, like, fun and this identity has nothing to do with the booze. And I think it kick-started and hyper started my ability to kind of, like, grow from there. So the first year was like deep, deep reflection of, like, what got me here, dealing with, like, thinking I wasn't enough, some confidence, deep rooted issues. But I think, like, I leaned into that suffering, as I said earlier. And, like, the more I, like, unpacked that, the more it unleashed this version of myself that I just love so much more.
Yeah. No, I mean, man, we could talk about this part for a very, very, very
It's
long
really
time.
complex and it's hard to keep it concise.
Yeah. You know, w- w- it's also interesting, the social dynamic of it. I didn't lose friends, right? But naturally, um, I just was more intentional about where I wanted to be and who I wanted to be with. It's not like, I got into a fight with anyone for not drinking, and you start to notice who doesn't care what you do and who actually is impacted by it. And no, none of the people that really even were impacted by it really even mattered ultimately.
I
Uh,
actually, not to interrupt you, but I do have, like, a key observation I remember making early on in my sobriety around friendship, because I hear from so many people, like, are my friends going to still like me? Like, am I still going to run with the same crowd? And, like, there was a pretty binary result from me telling people that I was sober, working on it, and didn't want to drink. And there were two types of people when you were out at the bar, right? Because I still went to the concert. There was the friend who was like, dude, just have a beer. It's fine. We're having fun. And then there was the actual friend who was like, can I get you a water? How are you feeling? And it was like, I was like, it was like the Red Sea parted. Like, now I see the path. Now I see who I should spend time with. It wasn't about, oh, I can't hang out with people that don't drink or that drink a lot. It was, I can hang out with people that drink who are looking out for me. That's my tribe. That's my pack. And I think the friendship circle, like when you are going out and having fun in a city, like I knew every bartender. I was homies with a bunch of people that hung out.
Damn.
They weren't my real friends though.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I had great times, but I don't miss those people.
It's
I
funny.
real
I
miss
see.
the ones that are like, bro, how are you doing?
Yeah, it's funny. I saw recently, like a picture on Instagram of this one bouncer at this bar in the West Village who I was just boys with, who always let me cut the line, who always got me in, who always treated me like royalty, and who just did everything for me. And at the time, I was like, that's my guy, like that's my boy. And nothing bad happened, obviously, and a part of me you know, just like, man, I wish this guy saw me now and like that we could just hang out, like me being me. Uh, because at the time, I used to mention all the time, like, I know Carlos. Carlos is my guy, and haven't spoken to Carlos in years now. Uh, but it's the same. It's the same idea. Yeah, no, it's the social dynamic part of it is interesting because also you start to realize how much of what you did didn't really matter. Like, like now I've gone to events where I'm one of, maybe it's just me, or maybe there's one other person who's not like drinking that much. And you start to look around and you're like, man, like people might be having fun, but there's a part of them that's like, I don't want to say dying inside, but also dying inside because they're not in the moment. And that's something that's kind of stood out to me as well. Um, and I think bringing this back really quick to the day that this happened for you, and you kind of reflect back on it now, and when you made that decision, I think I'd love to leave the audience with a piece of practical advice around this. You still work in software sales. I still work in software sales. One of the biggest things that I did for myself on this journey was I got a new, as you know, with Salesforce, they rotate every year, and I got a new manager this year, and I just kind of point blank told him at the beginning of the year, I was like, look, I don't drink. I don't like happy hours. Like, I'm a lot more focused on my fitness. I would choose being with my family over attending any one of these events. It's not because I don't care about my career, but like I'm just gonna call a spade a spade. And I did. And it hasn't been a problem at all. But I do feel like a lot of people struggle with this part of it. And I do think that there's a correlation between building that confidence to being able to have that conversation and um, draw your boundaries essentially. But is there any other part of that that you can speak to or kind of guide the audience on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same exact way as you. Like I like go out of my way in interviews to tell people I'm sober. Like I'm at the point in my life, and I think the advice that I wish I could give myself when I got sober was like own who you are and be unapologetic about it. Because if you own who you are and you're unapologetic about it, and it's not arrogance, right? It's like I don't drink, I'm sober, it's not for me, I prioritize fitness. Like you're going to attract the right scenarios from there. Like your manager's going to be like, "Hey man, it's all good. Like sneak out." I remember my manager at Salesforce when I was going through this was like unbelievable. And she like gave me a ton of grace. She was like, "We're going to have a team dinner. Like come out with us and we're probably going to go. Like don't feel bad if you want to sneak out to the gym after the dinner. Don't feel bad if you can't make it tonight. Like prioritize your health." Um and then there's a layer where you get past that like insecurity. We're like, "I want to go to the team dinner. This is freaking awesome." And then there's also the FOMO, right? Like I can go to the team dinner and the team's going to go to karaoke after, and like I'm probably not going to miss out on that much. And then like to I'm someone that likes to like play the other side of the coin. Like I use it to motivate me. Like I show up the next day, I'll get in the office at 7:30 on purpose, or I'll get on the computer early, and like that's my way of being like I'm ahead. Like I didn't go out last night. Like let's use this as motivation. Let's get ahead by that. So like spinning scenarios to empower you to show up has helped me a lot. But I think it's owning the identity. Like, you know, I think life is just based on, and my wife and I talk a lot about this. She's a big expectation setter, and I've come to really appreciate it because, like, if you set the right expectations in life, it usually works out pretty well. Like, misaligned expectations are when you feel guilty, you feel not confident, and that's with yourself and with others.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No,
I think set
I
the
agree.
expectation with yourself that, like, I'm gonna own who I am, and I'm gonna trust that the right people, places, opportunities will present themselves. And, like, from my experience, the more I do that, the more people, places, and opportunities present themselves, and the happier I am with those people, in those environments, in that job. Like, everything else kinda just falls into your bucket.
I agree. I agree. And I would double down on that. I mean, I think that over the course of my journey, and as that confidence has built, I have been unapologetic about the brand that I'm building, whether it's through fitness, whether it's through not drinking, whether it's through this podcast, the books, whatever it is. And I'm not going to lie that 10 years ago, especially in my banking days, there was a person who was afraid to talk about any of it out of fear that, I was going to be committing some sort of career suicide by taking the path less chosen. And one of the things that, I'll agree with you on is that once you own it and you're unapologetic about it, um, everything just opens up from there. And I think honestly, that's the perfect segue now into zero proof
I
because
actually have
yeah,
one more piece that I think, like, if I were to give practical
yeah,
advice or reflection, like, I think there's, like, I love extreme ownership. I think it's freaking awesome. Like, I think it just taking responsibility for every scenario, like, tends to unlock more good for you, even if you want, like, I think when it comes to drinking and accepting that, like, in a lot of environments, it's not the norm, and instead of playing victim in that scenario and being like, "Oh, like, why won't my team do things that, like, I like, own the scenario and plan something that you like and bring your team along. Own the scenario, like, realize I'm the one that's out because I made the decision to not drink. That's okay, and I can either do something with them or I can jump out, but, like, that's on me, that's not on them. I think there's a lot of freedom in taking that ownership. I think it's easy to, like, let social situations, like, make you feel this big. Like, at the end of the day, like, you can go drink if you want, like, that's an option, but, like, you're making the decision, so own it. Be it, like, and do something with it.
that's
And
a
that's a
really good
pretty
takeaway.
direct, harsh advice, but I think, like, the more I've leaned into that, the happier I've been and the more comfortable in my skin I've been. It's like, I'm actually the one that's being different here, and that's okay.
It's a really, really good takeaway. I didn't think about that, but especially in that setting, I think that's very practical advice that we tend to think the social chair has to be the person who drinks a lot or who where it doesn't have to be that way if you take ownership and you can still cultivate a fun environment. You're not going to be sitting in a quiet office with your hands folded. You could still do fun things.
And I
uh,
believe in empathy, right? I think people generally do the right good thing. Like, there's no worse feeling than, like, having to be the reason to redirect the crowd. Like, that sucks too. Like, if you can get something 1/10 of the time on a team of 10 that's aligned to you, that's a W.
I agree. And that just kind of made me think about another thing here. Um, I recently read a book called Quiet: The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. It's by Susan Cain. Because one of the things that I've realized since kind of going down this journey, and it goes back to, the idea of social dynamics, is I've become a lot more introverted, but I'm not mad about it, to be honest. In fact, like, kind of, I think it's who I am at my core. Um, would you say that you've leaned more in this direction over the last couple of years?
I have a probably hot take on it. I don't know if hot take's the right
Bring
word,
it.
but I have a
Hot,
different take.
hot takes are good for a show.
I think to keep with the same sentiment of what I just said around, like, the ownership of it, I think that in the environments in which I used to drink a lot, I'm an introvert. When I surround myself with people that I'm not like aligned with, I'm an introvert. I isolate. All the buddies are going to the bar tonight to watch the game. Like, I'm going to sit that one out. I choose to be an introvert. You know where I'm an extrovert? I actually am an extrovert at heart, is when I find people that have similar interests to me.
Yeah.
That
So like you're at the
unlocks the extrovert, right? Like, I went to, speaking of Brian Mazza, high performance lifestyle training. That's the type of environment. I'm an extrovert. Zero proof, extrovert. My family, extrovert. Going to the bar with friends, sitting there while they all get hammered, introvert. So I think the environment you're in actually dictates that a lot. It took me a while to figure that out, but I think it's on you to find the right environment to allow you to be that. Now, I'm sure there's someone way smarter than me that's done a lot more work on this in terms of introvert, extrovert that could take me to the ground in a debate. But in my experience, I've found actually introvert, extrovert is very much associated to, am I hanging out with people that are aligned to like my identity and the things that make me tick and give me life? Or am I hanging out with people that like drain me and like take away from my identity and make me feel like an outsider? That's how I think about it.
I think that's
I don't think
a
I've become
really good take.
really
I
extrovert. I think both.
I think that that's a really, really good take. And I'll be honest, when I brought this up, and part of the reason I read that book was in the context of the corporate arena while going through this decision to not drink. And I realized that I went from being an extrovert to an introvert in the corporate arena. And that's because it's not really my, it's not my environment. The way that it's built, in terms of societal expectations, it's not really that environment that's going to be conducive to me being who I want to be. I'm unapologetically being who I want to be, despite the fact that it's not that environment. And so I think that was a really, really, really good answer, and one that I'm personally going to reflect on after this episode, because it's a topic that's taken a great interest for me over the last couple of months in particular. And in the book, it wasn't really mentioned that way, and so this is a really, really insightful takeaway. So thanks for calling that out.
Yeah, and I
Um,
mean, like and I know you mentioned this earlier, like this concept is kind of like at its barest of bones, like what inspired my partner and I to create Zero Proof.
yeah,
Like I
I
can go
mean,
into that in the story and all that, like, but I do think like this is like a key tie back to like what inspired us to kind of start this newsletter and try to build this community.
yeah, let's do it. Let's dive right in. Tell us what started it. I mean, for the listeners out there, if you are not already uh, subscribe to this newsletter, Billy, you got to send me the link. I'm going to put it in the show notes because this is a newsletter that I read out every time it comes in my email. It's short, it's succinct, it's entertaining, and it's. I mean, for me, it's truth, and so I want to make sure I call that out. But tell us about how it all came to be.
Yeah, it's so my partner Connor Murphy, he's not related to me. We just happen to have the same last name. Him and I were roommates in San Francisco. Um, Arguably, would say best friends. He was a groomsman in my wedding, and one of the cool things about Connor is he's seen my journey. Like I got sober in San Francisco. He was my roommate, and there was always this calling of like me wanting to do something in the sober arena or the not drinking arena. And as I kind of had gone through my own journey, like I started to correlate like how much fun I was having without drinking. And like this personal observation of like, man, I used to think I had to go to a concert and drink. Wait, it's more fun. Man, I used to think I have to go to a business dinner and get the customer to have a bottle of wine so they start telling me the truth. Wait, that's not the case. I actually had a more deep, impactful conversation without that. Like there was so much correlation on that topic for me that I was sitting down with Connor and he was like, dude, like and he's incredible entrepreneur, Forbes 30 for 30 in Europe, like has done some very cool things. He was like, I think there might be something here. Like like let's lift up the hood and let's look at the data. Like what is the world and what is America saying right now about not drinking? And like, where's the market headed? And like this like fun little project that him and I kind of like started talking through became like so apparent when we saw we saw some super interesting things. Like of the 173 million people in America that drink, Gallup did a poll, 34% of them raised their hand as like, I don't want to drink as much or if at all. Like, that's interesting. We saw the non-alcoholic market, right? The initial data point was like in 2019, it was like, I think it was 8 billion in revenue. By 2022 is going to be 11 billion, right? And that's not slowing down. You're seeing $50 million investments and an $800 million valuation in companies like Athletic Brewing. So we started to question like, okay, there's something here. People are not interested in drinking as much. Like, what's our angle? How are we going to come to the market? How are we going to inspire people in this arena? And what we realized was like, people just tend to be consumers. It's who we are in nature. We want the quick fix. So everyone's making every product you could possibly think of. There's a million non-alcoholic beers with the take. There's a million products. There's a lot of books out there. There's not really anyone though that's like, and I shouldn't say anyone, but our opinion and our angle in the market was there's not really anyone that's like calling out the fact that like you can have a ton of fun without drinking. And it's not about the product. It's about like finding the community of people so you can have that extroverted experience and live your best life without drinking. And we really want to empower people to do that. So the best way and what we've done, and I know you're an avid reader every week, but we thought like we'd start with the basics. Like let's write a newsletter. Let's talk about what's going on in the industry. Let's give people hard data so they can see like I'm not alone. Let's inspire people with like, star type figures, right? Actors, entrepreneurs, motivational speakers. Like let's like bring to light how many people don't drink anymore and how many people are talking about not drinking. And then let's talk about like why you have the feelings that you do every time you go to drink, right? How many times, like, why do I feel like I need to drink when I go to the Super Bowl? Why do I feel like I need to drink after a long, stressful day at work? Why do I feel peer pressure? So we just started kind of going deeper and deeper into this idea of like, how do we create a newsletter that's going to empower people to take on the identity to just have fun without drinking? And we're not here to tell you to do it, but we just thought it was like a super interesting opportunity to kind of shed a light on this evolving, you could call it market from a business lens, but I look at it as a community. We look at it as a community. And like what we're, to give you a little bit of a lift under the hood, what we're really striving to do is to create that community, right? We're starting with a newsletter, but we have a hypothesis out there that there's a lot of people in the world now that want to connect without having to worrying about having to drink there.
Yeah. I think, you know, at the core of what you're doing is, and community is grounded in relatability. And that is the content that you're putting out there. And someone like myself, and not just me, and you had mentioned this earlier, a lot of times we just want to be validated. We don't want to feel like we're in this alone. And it's cool to be validated by, some of these athletes, some of these well-known people. It's not just being validated by, you know, a one-off person, but there is an entire community of very successful individuals in various fields who are paving the path to say, you know, this choice this choice is okay, and, it might even, if anything, kind of enhance your desired outcome.
And I
Uh,
think like to put a hot take out there, like we've been duped. Like you lift up the hood on the data, you do the work that Connor and I have been doing, like you should see the amount of money that goes into making you feel like you need to drink to do all these activities. And really, if you want my honest hot take on this, like bring it back to the introvert extrovert. Of course you feel introverted when you don't drink. Alcohol is in front of you 24/7, 365, where you work, where you drive on the highway, on billboards. every single commercial on the TV, every healthy activity, alcohol has found its way into it. Of course, you're going to feel introverted when you go to have these social environments. So, I personally, as someone that's just loves to socialize with people, like I feel compelled and I feel like a deep rooted like need to help build that community, right? Like there's so many people like you and I, Bishoy, who feel isolated that don't need to. Like you
Yeah.
and I
I
can
mean,
go
to your
for a
point,
run with 20 other people, right? And then hit up a concert, have an awesome meal, get every single interaction you'd ever want and more, and it'd be a 10 out of 10 Saturday. Like, why aren't we doing
absolutely.
that?
To your point about being duped, like it and this is just like a really basic example of it. Like it didn't hit me until these last 2 years where you realized how much money you poured into alcohol, right? The thousands of dollars to be sitting at a table to drink out of a $40 bottle or a $50 bottle, right? Like it really made very little sense on various fronts. And speaking to the market element of things, one of the things that I'm really curious about is, to your point, there's now a ton of non-alcoholic beer brands out there. There's a lot of non-alcoholic liquor brands coming out there. There's been a huge rise in psychedelics for a lot of young people, and it's really hard to tell. I know we're moving away from alcohol, but it is hard to tell where it is exactly that we're going, because I think every one of these, new brands or these new categories is essentially trying to now fight for that attention that's going away from the big alcohol companies. And I'm naturally curious about that. Do you have any thoughts, ideas?
Um, I think I think it's super hard to predict that. I mean, the more I look at it, the more clear is we are headed towards the direction of not drinking alcohol as much. Um, any good business, any good consumer product would capitalize on that opportunity and take their spin. So you are seeing psychedelics, you are seeing a bunch of supplements. Um, I tend to try to root myself in what I know I'm certain of, and I'm certain that people will always seek to find community with like-minded individuals. And I think the market's going to go through a bunch of different turns, right? Like you're going to see the psychedelic group. You're going to see, people heavily leaning on non-alcoholic beer, which is fine. Um, what I am also certain of is like there's going to be a lot more events in this world where alcohol is not even considered. And we want to cover that. We want to talk to that in our newsletter. And we want to build a community of like people that can start helping us inspire those types of events. And we don't really have a stance. Like, it's not about do you drink, do you not drink, do you do psychedelics? Like, that's not the point. The point is, how do we find a really good environment to have fun in with people who are simply just trying to remove drinking from their lives in some capacity? Whether that's, I just want to go out one Saturday night a month and not worry about drinking. Great. I've been sober for 25 years. Great. And everything in between. Like, this isn't about like, you have to be sober for X amount. Like, let's just find fun without the worry of alcohol. Like it's there, and there's a lot to come from that. And candidly, it's been a really good project and fun kind of experience lifting up that hood. Like, and it's going to continue to be fun. And every week there's more data. I mean, I'm a sports guy. I find it fascinating that the Olympics had a non-alcoholic beer sponsor as their beer sponsor. The French Open was non-alcoholic serving. Like major events are starting to kick right. I had my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law went to Lollapalooza in Chicago. There were non-alcoholic tents. Like 5 years ago, there's no. How can we sell as much alcohol as possible, right? Generate revenue. There's this whole world opening up, um, and we want to be at the forefront of it. We want to help build the community and just create that connection. And I don't know. It's a little woo woo, but
No,
I'm
I think, look, I think it's
connection
I
is
don't
there.
think it's woo anymore. I think it was definitely strange to hear about, and people didn't want to talk about it. But I also don't think it's just like the alcohol front. I'll give you an example. I'm an investor in a company called Drink Barcode. I don't know if you've seen them, heard of them. The CEO is actually based out in California, in the LA area. His name is Bar Malik. He used to be the director of strength and performance for the Knicks. And then eventually went on to work with the Lakers. So he built relationships with a ton of NBA players. Kyle Kuzma is a big part of making the brand happen. 20 calories, right, in a bottle relative to Gatorade. Lot healthier than you. And they partnered up with the Brooklyn Nets this last year, and so the Nets weren't, giving their players Gatorade anymore. Now they're giving them Barcode, and that's a huge, transition from what you and I grew up with regards to the world of sports drinks, right? Sugar was normal. It was, Michael Jordan, right? Like, I always laugh looking back on it, right? Michael Jordan, McDonald's, and Gatorade, right? And the guy smoked cigars all the time. And that was, and I was a huge Jordan fan. I still am, obviously. But like, you know, I think as a society, we are starting to look underneath and call out, what marketing has done to us, by these various industries. And, it all goes back to alcohol, obviously, because I think alcohol plays a big part in lots of people's lives. It impacts how, events are set up, whether it's, weddings, birthdays, 21st birthdays are a huge thing for everybody, right? Everything revolves around alcohol, work, celebrations, anything happy or sad. If you're at a funeral, it doesn't matter, wedding or funeral, alcohol is being served, regardless of the occasion. And so I think what you're doing is incredibly special, and it deserves, every single platform, because you're also, I feel like you're also getting in this world at such, it's like the perfect time, which I'm sure you probably feel the same way. But it's like getting in on a startup, like right as it's really heating up. In the world of sales, this is when you're going to make your most money, right? If you join a company at this point, and you're joining this field and building this platform at the perfect time. And so
Yeah, and I
kudos
think
to
the
you.
cool thing, and like this is, like I feel like a deep personal connection to this mission, and it's really not about making money. It's about if that comes great, it's about creating connections, and to take a 10,000-foot view on everything we just talked about. Like, we all know the first step towards change and meaningful change is awareness, and like it's so hard. Like, one thing people have more than ever is information in front of them, and it's scattered, and we don't process it, and we don't like put our head in all the content we consume, so we don't remember anything. Like, we send a newsletter every Wednesday. We try to make it 5 minutes or less, and it's your time to say, I'm going to spend 5 minutes to become aware of what's going on in the world of non-alcohol, not drinking, and why that's going to help me have a little bit more fun, why that's going to help me be healthy. Like, we're trying to make it like an opportunity for everyone to start making those correlations. Man, I am being duped. And like, when you read the first one, you're probably like, okay, this one, you've read we're over 25 news. Like, it's shocking. I mean, I surprise myself every time I'm doing this research. Like, how is this data not being socialized more?
Yeah, they
Because I
don't
don't
want
want
it
it to.
to be. They don't want it to be. uh, yeah, no, Billy, man, you're doing something incredible, and I want you to know that there's probably a lot of other people out there, and if they're not voicing it to you, that are being personally impacted in a positive way, the same way that I am, by your work. And you know, similar to what you said, it's always been important to me to lead with purpose. When you go down this route, and um, I've noticed that when you lead with purpose over a drive for money, in this case, the outcomes tend to be tenfold, and then the money just kind of falls into play after that, which
And I
um,
think, like, to tie it all together, like, that's the identity shift, right? Like, that's the Billy Murphy journey was I want the external data point that's going to be validating. Is it money? Is it a stat sheet? No, I just want to show up as the version of me. I want to trust the right stuff happens, and I want to help inspire other people that are like me. Like, it's that simple. And I think like we're in this cool part of, I think Gen Z is like unbelievable at this. Like, they own who they are and they live that way. And I think like, I appreciate the kind words, but I think like we're all doing it. You're doing it. Like, let's surround ourselves with these types of people, because what we can do together is so much more impactful than what we do in our silos.
You're spot on, my friend. I think that's, the perfect note to end on. Thank you for walking us through your journey, for helping us get an understanding of your moments of clarity, how that clarity ultimately turned into confidence, and how you're using your platform now to become contagious. Thanks for joining me today. You got it.
Of course. Thanks for having me. We'll chat.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. And let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.